It's your boy Luke, here again for another NFL DFS video, this time for our Week 3 NFL DFS picks. In this video, we're going to cover my top 6 players to target at each position going into this weekend's slate. And in Week 2, our picks were above average, I'd say. They weren't perfect, but they definitely got the job done. We had a decent cash for our main GPP lineup, turning our $75 entry into $400. So going to flash the lineup here on the screen for you guys. Obviously, Kyler Murray was spearheading our team there, had a very good day. We just had him paired with the wrong Cardinals, unfortunately. I mean, Rondale Moore absolutely went off for that team, so if we had him in that build, probably would have been a little bit more successful, but having guys like Cooper Kupp didn't hurt. Same thing with Ezekiel Elliott. We did have KJ Osborne as our biggest value play of the entire week, somebody who I absolutely thought was going to go off in that Arizona-Minnesota game, and he ended up doing that, but didn't make our main GPP build. I don't know what happened with my optimizer. It wasn't spitting out as much Osborne as I was hoping that it would. I mean, I had him projected through the roof, so perhaps it was a little bit of coding error there, but either way, we still had a great week, and it wasn't anything compared to our near GPP takedown on the golf side, though, where we took second place in a GPP for a little bit over $2,000 worth of profit. So overall, it was a very good weekend, but now we look to build on that kind of momentum, move on to Week 3 here, and actually take something down this time. I want first place. I'm very competitive. I smell the blood in the water, so we're going to be diving in head first for that. And again, we have showdown content coming out this week. If you guys are looking for values, sleepers, and fades for their full slate as well, all of that will be coming out later in the week. So a whole slate of content for you guys. We also have the golf content I was talking about, and of course our live stream on Sunday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time, where we're going to talk injuries, player pool. We're going to build some lineups live for you on there. Do any Q&A that you have as well. So make sure to stop by. Again, that'll be Sunday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. So without further delay, let's hop into the picks for this week. We're going to kick off our analysis here with our favorite QBs for the week. And at number 6, we have Kirk Cousins of the Minnesota Vikings, who at $6,300 is a little bit priced up from where we saw him in a few weeks past, but still has a very good matchup against the Seattle Seahawks, a team that got absolutely torched by the Tennessee Titans, primarily on the ground last week. I mean, Derrick Henry was absolutely torching them up, but good to see that offenses were able to put sustained drives up against them, and I really think that the Kirk Cousins and that Minnesota offense is going to have a lot of success as well. So you can see I have him projected for 19.6 points, and in this game with a massive over-under, it's 55.5 points. I do think that he's going to hit his ceiling more often than not. If we take a look at his numbers over the first 2 weeks, he's gotten off to quite the start. I mean, throwing 3 touchdowns in each game, also having quite a bit of yardage. If you've had him in your DFS lineups in Week 1 and Week 2, I'm pretty sure you've been pretty happy about it. So more than likely paying off, especially in the smaller field GPP kind of format. So going in here to Week 3, I don't think he has the highest upside of anyone on this list, but a very solid floor, somebody that I would definitely be comfortable going to in cash games in terms of a Minnesota stack. At number 5, we do have one of the cheaper options I'm willing to go to this week in Matt Ryan, playing against the New York Giants. I really like that matchup. A lot of people are looking at the Giants like a maybe top 15 defense, top 10 defense, if you're really bullish about them, that kind of thing, but I'm not necessarily buying it. I mean, we did see them get torched a little bit the last time out, and you can see it just 18.4 points in terms of his projection. That's still more than well enough points to pay off that $5,400 price tag. I also think that he's going to be a relatively unique option. You could stack him up with Calvin Ridley, Kyle Pitts, perhaps even Mike Davis, who's going to be one of my running backs here on our next section, but you can create a very unique build. They're all relatively cheap as well. I mean, Calvin Ridley's not even among the top 4 price wide receivers this week. Kyle Pitts, same kind of thing, and Mike Davis, whole way down in that $5,000 range. So if you end up playing this stack, you can pay up for 2 of the stud running backs. You can pay up for a stud wide receiver, Travis Kelce, that kind of thing. And that'll definitely end up making my exposure come the end of the week on Sunday. At number 4, we have Matthew Stafford playing against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Tampa Bay has a ton of injuries on that defense. They've also gotten torched by the likes of Dak Prescott. So at $6,400, I really do like Matthew Stafford this week. I am projected right now for 19.8 points. And again, a lot of that has to do with the injuries and the bodies that Tampa Bay is going to be missing on defense. Stacks on this team are going to be extremely popular. Again, this is a relatively chalky take, right? Everyone knows about these injuries to the defense. They've already gone torched with those guys in the game. So people like Cooper Kupp are going to be extremely chalky, people like Matthew Stafford as well. So in terms of stacking, I'm trying to use guys that are a little bit more unique, like Robert Woods, perhaps even Tyler Higbee, to still get into that game environment that I expect to be a high-scoring shootout between these two high-powered offenses. I just want to make sure that I'm not duplicating myself with 10 to 15% of the entire field. At number 3, we're going to have Justin Herbert at $6,500, who is my highest upside play on the week. A lot of that has to do with them playing against the Chiefs. I am projected right now for 20.1 points, but this guy has legit 35 plus point ceilings in him. A lot of that has to do with the game environment. Again, the Kansas City Chiefs, not a great defense, but also a team that loves getting into shootouts because they win most of them. I mean, they have Patrick Mahomes heading it. The fact that they lost against the Ravens last week was definitely an outlier for that offense. For them to have those turnovers at the end of the game, not going to happen very often. So I do like the game environment for Justin Herbert in this game. A reason why he has such high upside is the guy's been running the ball this year, especially in the red zone. They've been running a lot of reads, a lot of option plays for Herbert. So if he ends up running in a touchdown or two, he could easily crack that 30-point mark and put up a performance like we saw from Kyler Murray there in week 2. Speaking of Kyler Murray, speaking of week 2, at number 2, we have Kyler Murray, right? $8,400. He's going to be a lot more expensive than somebody like Justin Herbert. I definitely think he gets to that ceiling a lot more often than him, but you're going to be paying for that with the $1,800 price hike. I have him projected for 25.5 fantasy points right now, and as of right now, he's the number 1 fantasy QB in 2021. He's doing it all for the Cardinals, and I expect that to end that way here in 2021, and that's barring injury, obviously. Jaguars have shown to be very soft to this point against opposing QBs. I mean, the Texans went out there week 1 and absolutely torched them alive, so imagine what this Arizona Cardinals offense is going to do. Enough said. At number 1, we have Russell Wilson, though, who I don't have as highly projected as Kyler Murray, but the $7,600 price tag is great. I also love this matchup. Again, I mentioned it before. I love the guys on the Vikings side of the ball in this game, but obviously also love the Seahawks side that has been very efficient to this point, and I definitely think Russell Wilson's due for a little bit more touchdown upside. He's gotten quite a few of his touchdowns vultured by Chris Carson, by a couple of the other backs on the team as well, as they've had receiving plays get down to the 1-yard line and get shoved out of bounds, and a lot of that's due to volatility. You know, it's going to go one way or another, but come the end of the year, usually it ends up right about even. So Russell Wilson is going to be due for a few lucky touchdowns, perhaps even a few rushing touchdowns as well. So I like pairing him up with Tyler Lockett, also with DK Metcalf, who we'll get to a little bit later on in this video, a little bit of a sneak peek there, but DK Metcalf, a great target this week. Same thing with Tyler Lockett. You could even go to Gerald Everett at tight end for a stack. And now getting into our fantasy running backs. At number 6, we have Saquon Barkley, who has slowly geared up throughout the season, getting more and more touches. So at $6,500 against the Falcons, I think this is a great spot for him to break out and really put up the type of performances that you were expecting from Barkley when you drafted him in the first round. So he saw just 62% of snaps in week 1, which was very modest. They loved spelling him with Davante Booker, gave him quite a few carries as well. But there in week 2, in the more competitive game, he saw 80% of snaps, which is very encouraging for Saquon Barkley. Obviously, his target's going to be right around 92-93% of snaps. He's never going to play 100% of snaps for this offense. They just need to keep the workload off of him a little bit. And against a soft Atlanta defense, in a game with a 48-point over-under, it's likely one of the few games this year where the Giants are going to be favored as well. I really like going to Barkley. Again, I think he's getting closer to being 100%, and even 85-90% of Barkley is going to be a fantasy running back stud. I mean, this guy has easily the most explosive legs of anyone in the NFL, one of the fastest players as well. And again, against an Atlanta Falcons defense that has so many holes in it, I absolutely love targeting that. At number 5, we have Mike Davis. So I was talking about the Atlanta side of things before, how I like stacking up that offense because they're so cheap. And Mike Davis is a perfect example of this. He's only $5,100 playing against the Giants. And the reason why he's priced so low is Cordarrelle Patterson has vultured the absolute shit out of him. Cordarrelle Patterson has multiple touchdowns coming out of week 2. Also plenty of yardage and usage out of the backfield as a wide receiver. Again, we're expecting that to change though. Atlanta's been playing from behind. They've gotten their asses whooped to this point here in 2021. And now that they face the Giants, who aren't so good themselves, I expect this game to be a lot more competitive. And last year we saw Mike Davis be a huge part of that Carolina Panthers offense when Christian McCaffrey went down. He was getting tons of carries, 20-25 carries a game, also getting plenty of touches out of the backfield as a wide receiver. So on DraftKings, where we're getting credit for PPR, Davis is a 3-down back and seemingly should be getting more carries over Cordarrelle Patterson by the end of the year. You know, might have been a little bit of riding the hot hand. Perhaps Cordell Patterson was just a little bit more healthy than Mike Davis last week. So I expected things to return to normal, for things to regress back to the mean. And Mike Davis at $5,100 is an absolute smash play. I mean, the guy should be priced probably closer to $59,000, even $6,000 on this slate. So I think this is a great spot for him to bounce back against a relatively weak Giants front seven. At number 4, we have Austin Eckler of the going against the Kansas City Chiefs, playing for the Los Angeles Chargers. He's $7,200, so a little bit more expensive than we saw last time around, but had a very good performance last week with somebody that we touted, and I'm going right back to him in this game. I am projected for 18.7 points here in week 3, and like I mentioned before with Justin Herbert, this is a game that you want to target. I mean, the Chiefs love getting into these shootouts. Again, they understand that their defense isn't very good, and where they're going to win games is by just outscoring their opponents. So they're willing to give up points. They're willing to give up chunky yardages as well. They're more of a bend, don't break type defense. They know they're going to give up points. They're just trying to limit how many touchdowns that end up happening. So for Austin Eckler, he's going to get his yardage in this game. I have him projected for over 100 total yards, also projected for 4.5 catches. So definitely a very solid floor with Austin Eckler. He's not as somebody who's necessarily as touchdown dependent, somebody who can get plenty of catches, plenty of yardage, and put up a massive score that way. So in this soft matchup against the Chiefs, he's a no-brainer play for me, and I don't mind matching him up with somebody like Justin Herbert just because of the receiving upside as well. At number 3, speaking of receiving upside, Najee Harris has looked very good for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and a lot of people would, counter at me saying, he hasn't put up any massive performances yet, but he hasn't necessarily had the opportunity to do so, right? Playing from behind against Buffalo, playing from behind against the Raiders, right? They can't hammer home Harris. He looked very impressive in the passing game, though, and that's why I'm so bullish on him here in week 3. I'm playing against a weak Cincinnati Bengals team and only $6,600. I have him projected right now for 17.8 points, and again, he bailed us out last week with that late touchdown reception, but good to see that he has that receiving upside. And in this game script where I expect the Steelers to kind of hand it to the Bengals, Harris is going to get plenty of carries, likely 25 or even 26 touches in this game, and to this point has been extremely efficient. I mean, the guy makes people miss on essentially every carry that he has, always fighting for 2-3 extra yards, and in terms of fantasy, that can be extremely productive. At number 2, we have Derrick Henry, though. The guy went out and dropped a 50 bomb last week on DraftKings. So at $8,600, you're definitely not getting a cheap price tag. But the front seven against the Colts, very stout against the run. And I think you're getting a situation here where many people are going to avoid Derrick Henry, even though he's had massive, massive success against the Colts in the past. Again, the Colts have a very good front seven. Somebody who last year only allowed about 72 yards rushing per game. That was number 1 in the NFL, but last year, Derrick Henry put up a 40 bomb on this Indy defense. So not necessarily the case for Derrick Henry. He's an absolute animal, somebody who is just built different. You can say that. A good defense isn't going to stop Derrick Henry when he's absolutely on, and he's somebody that gets very streaky, right? He'll go out, put up 100-yard performances for 3-4 straight games, hell, even 150-yard plus performances for 2-3 games, and then kind of cool off. And last game we saw him start to heat up. He went out there, was running the ball with great efficiency, was running people over left and right. I think he could be getting into a heater here, and at low ownership, again, people are going to avoid him because he's playing against a Colts defense. I still have him projected for 22.9 points and my number 2 play on the slate. But he's not my favorite running back. That is reserved for Dalvin Cook. He's $8,400, so a little bit cheaper, but that's not why I love him. It's just all about this defense he's playing against. It's going to be the Seattle Seahawks, who, allowed Derrick Henry to go for the 50 bomb last week. So you have Dalvin Cook here, almost as efficient as Derrick Henry, but definitely more efficient out of the backfield. So in terms of fantasy production, you're looking at 2 equal running backs right there, even if Derrick Henry is just another beast of his own in terms of the rushing efficiency. Cook looked good in week 2, went down a few times with a few dings here and there, but he's always going down, so I don't look into that too much. And again, I like these two so much, Cook and Henry that is, that I'm willing to pair them up in lineups together. It's going to be a little bit difficult. They're both very expensive, but if you're using that Falcon stack, you're definitely able to fit in both of these guys, especially if you avoid Kelsey at the tight end position. And now getting into our wide receivers. At number 6, we have Keenan Allen, another guy in that Chiefs-Chargers game that I'm looking to get a ton of exposure to. He's $6,600, projected for 17.3 points. And again, somebody like Austin Eckler, who's not touchdown dependent to hit his ceiling. Again, this Kansas City defense allows a ton of yardage. They allow chunk plays left and right. And again, their mantra is bend, don't break. So guys like Keenan Allen that thrive on huge yardage games are going to be in a very good situation here against these Chiefs. And again, somebody who you can stack with Eckler, Herbert. It's a little bit more of an expensive stack, but a very high upside one against this Kansas City defense. At number 5, we have DK Metcalf, who I mentioned before is a very good option to stack with Russell Wilson. And at $7,300, he's a little bit more expensive than he should be given his production to this point, but the matchup is great against the Vikings. He's likely to be a little bit lower owned because of that price tag. So at 18.7 projected points, I'm definitely going to have plenty of him on this slate. Again, he's due for some regression as well. A lot of the touchdowns to this point have gone to Tyler Lockett, and a lot of that has to do with the attention that Metcalf is garnering. You know, somebody who's very fast, very tall, somebody who you honestly have to double to even slightly contain. And to this point, that's what teams have done. They've doubled DK Metcalf. It has left players like Tyler Lockett, also players like Gerald Everett wide open. So they've had very good performances to this point. But once defenses adjust, they stop wanting to get burned by these 80, 90-yard touchdowns by Lockett. Metcalf is going to eat. So that could potentially happen this week, and somebody I'm definitely targeting in GPP formats. At number 4, we have Justin Jefferson. I'm going right back to the well, guys. This guy is extremely efficient on this Vikings team, and just like DK Metcalf, also due for some positive regression. So $7,200 on the slate, playing against the Seahawks in that 55.5 over-under game, and a great stacking option again with Kirk Cousins. He's been consistently targeted more than KJ Osborne, who was the value play of the week last week, also more than Adam Thielen, but those guys have gone the explosive big plays to this point. So in terms of fantasy points, have far outshined Justin Jefferson, but if we take a look at opportunities, Jefferson has outshined those guys. So definitely going to be due to regress here at some point, especially when you consider Justin Jefferson a lot more explosive than both of those players, a lot faster, has better route running, overall just the better football player. So I'm very bullish on him long term and think this matchup against the Seahawks could be where he really shines for the first time here in 2021. Now we're going down to number 3. We have Juju Smith-Schuster at $6,000 of my Pittsburgh Steelers. So a little bit of a homer play here, but when we take a look at the situation, it makes perfect sense. They're going to be playing against the Cincinnati Bengals, who have a pretty dogshit defense. But on top of that, we have an injury to Deontay Johnson, which opens up a ton of targets for Schuster. Because Deontay Johnson's going out, that's going to leave about 12 to 13 targets per game for a lot of the other wide receivers on this team. And we know a lot of those aren't going to go to Chase Claypool, right? Claypool's more of a deep play threat, somebody who runs those deep fly routes, that kind of thing. And Deontay Johnson's the complete opposite, right? Short routes over the middle, taking the screen routes, everything like that. Juju Smith-Schuster is going to be fitting that role a lot more than somebody like Claypool. So in terms of the void filling that, I see Schuster as the bigger beneficiary of this injury situation. And while Big Ben is listed on the injury report, all signs right now are that he's expected to suit up and be good to go this week. I definitely like him, especially if Big Ben is playing for the Steelers. At number 2, we have Robert Woods, a guy that I love stacking up with Matthew Stafford this week. I especially love the price tag at $5,700. Again, he hasn't gone off to the best start for this Rams offense. Cooper Kupp's kind of gotten all the start on there, kind of gotten all the targets, but at some point, Robert Woods is going to make his hay. I mean, the guy was the number 1 wide receiver on that team last year, extremely explosive, was number 1 in the NFL in yards after catch. Number 2 was Cooper Kupp, so 2 absolute studs on that team, and he's my pivot off Kupp this week. I mean, you have Kupp a lot more expensive at the $7,000 range. You also have Kupp at 3 or even 4 times the ownership, depending on what site you're playing. So Woods is just as talented as Kupp, if not more talented. And again, once he gets his footing down with Stafford, when he gets that rapport down that Kupp and Stafford have shown to this point, he's going to absolutely shine. So it's more of an ownership play for me. It's also very much so a salary play. At $5,700, he's extremely underpriced. And at number 1, though, we have Tyreek Hill, and there's no one else in the NFL that can do what Tyreek Hill can. I mean, the guy's capable of putting up 45 or even 50 fantasy points in a game. So at $8,400 in a matchup against the Chargers that we're expecting absolute fireworks, potentially even 60 plus real points scored, the guy is going to be almost impossible to fade. So I have him projected right now for 22.4 points. I think he has a very good ceiling this week as well, potentially a 40, 50 point ceiling. Also a very good floor, right? Somebody who's definitely going to get his targets against this Chargers team. They don't have anyone that can match up with his speed. Also a game with such a high over-under that the Chiefs could be playing from behind. They could be playing from ahead. They're going to have to keep their foot on the gas pedal. We know that each team is capable of scoring and scoring in bunches. So he's already one of the best fantasy wide receivers, period. But when you match him up against a soft team in a high over-under game, he becomes completely unfadable. Now we're going to wrap it up with our tight ends to target. At number 6, we have Tyler Higbee, who is another option on that Rams offense that I like going to instead of Cooper Kupp. He's only $4,000 this week, so got a price decrease after his bad performance there in week 2. And he burned so many people last week that I expect him to be extremely low owned. And to be completely honest with you, he has a better matchup against this injury-decimated Buccaneers defense. He's also even cheaper and coming in at lower ownership. So if you're on him last week, you sure as shit should be on Tyler Higbee this week. Don't let that one performance get in your way. I mean, this guy is a highly productive offense, a team that's going to be in the red zone an absolute shit ton, and is athletic and very good at high pointing and catching balls in the red zone. So somebody you're going to want to have a ton of ownership for. And again, it stacks with Stafford and Woods. He's a very good third man in. At number 5, we have one of my cheap options for tight end. That's going to be Pat Freiermuth of the Pittsburgh Steelers, another guy who benefits greatly from the absence of Deontay Johnson. So he's only $3,300 playing against the Bengals. And again, a lot of the guys that are going to get the targets because Deontay Johnson are out are the guys that run these short, intermediate, and fast routes. And that's exactly what Freiermuth is doing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was officially named the starter over Eric Ebron there for week 2. And going forward, we're going to see him just incorporated more and more into this offense. He's very athletic. He showed a lot of propensity for catching balls in the red zone, especially in the preseason there. So by the end of the year, I think he's somebody that we're talking about week in and week out as potentially a top 10 tight end in the NFL. Not top 5 or anything like that. He's not explosive like people like Darren Waller or Travis Kelce, but a very sure-handed tight end that has a role in a relatively good offense. At number 4, though, we have one of the studs, somebody that you're going to see every single time on this list that he's playing on the slate, and that is Darren Waller. The guy's $7,400, and he's essentially matchup proof. He proved that last week against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they were double covering with linebackers and a safety for pretty much the entire game. The guy still got over 17 fantasy points, absolutely killed it against arguably the best defense in the NFL. So he's going to be by far the most targeted tight end in the NFL, a guy who's more explosive than anyone else. So the fact that we have him in the $7,000 range makes him almost a must play on the slate. At number 3, we have Mark Andrews. He's going to cost $5,000 this week, which is the main attractiveness, right? You know, he's only $5,000, which a lot of that has to do with his slump to start the year, but I have him projected for 15.8 points against this weak Lions defense. And again, I have a lot of question marks about this price, right? He hasn't quite been that bad to this point. Lamar Jackson's been a lot more running dependent than he has in the past. But Mark Andrews is the second highest paid tight end in the entire NFL. He's paid more than Darren Waller. So obviously he's expected to be a huge part of this offense. And I expect that to be the case come week 3 or even week 4. And number 2, we do have Travis Kelce, who is playing in that Chargers-Chiefs game. He is expensive at $8,200, but more than likely than not, Travis Kelce goes out there for over 100 yards, probably right around 6 catches and a touchdown. So he's going to break the slate if he does that. He's going to put up 27, even 28 points, and could make that Chiefs stack one of the ones that you have to have. So I have him projected right now for 19.6 points. No one's even close to him in terms of projection on this slate. Again, the price tag's hefty, but when you're going to be getting him in this type of game flow where the Chargers are going to score a ton of points, same thing with the Chiefs, he could almost be unavoidable. So that's why you see him there at number 2. He isn't my favorite play on the slate, though. That is reserved for TJ Hawkinson, who the price tag at $5,200 is even more stupid than that Mark Andrews price tag we saw. He's playing against the Ravens, who have a ton of injuries on defense, so haven't been quite as stout as we expected before the year. So Hawkinson's projected for 16.5 points right now, and that price difference, it's a $3,000 difference between Kelce and Hawkinson for only a 3-point difference in projection. I mean, obviously, Hawkinson's the better play right there. I mean, perhaps he's been the surprise of the year. I mean, getting over 10 targets per game in that Lions offense. But that Lions offense has been extremely productive. You know, Jared Goff doing a lot better than I think a lot of people expected him to. The offensive coordinator has been extremely creative. I mean, they've been running a lot of plays that we haven't seen for quite some time, and they're being fairly effective with them. So I don't necessarily think that they're going to be this effective for the entire year, but as a result, TJ Hawkinson going to be one of the best fantasy tight ends. I mean, that's becoming readily apparent. Going to be getting a lot more targets than other tight ends just because there's no one else on that team to really go to. And if they're going to be efficient, Hawkinson's going to be extremely efficient. So he jumps both Darren Waller and Travis Kelce in my rankings just because I do like the upside. I mean, he has a very similar ceiling to those type of players. at a fraction of the price. That's all for my week 3 picks, guys. Go ahead and let me know in the comments who you think the highest scorer on this slate is outside the quarterback position, and let me know why. For me, I think it's going to be Dalvin Cook. Again, they let up 50 points against Derrick Henry last week. A very good matchup in terms of over-under in a 55.5 point game. So for me, I think it's a slam dunk pick with Dalvin Cook, but go ahead and let me know what you guys think. As always, I really appreciate your support here on the channel. If you guys haven't already liked the video and subscribed to the channel, make sure you go ahead and do so you guys don't miss any of the content I post coming on into the future. More NFL content's going to be dropping throughout the week. We're going to have my values video coming out later on tonight. We're going to have my top fades and sleepers for the main slate tomorrow, as well as our live stream on Sunday that I mentioned before at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time, going over any of the last second injuries, some game theory notes. We're going to make some lineups for you guys. We're going to go over any Q&A that you guys have. So make sure to stop on by on Sunday morning at 11:30. And until then, guys, peace and good luck with any of your lineups.